All right, I think it's 1:30. We can go ahead and begin now. If everybody could take their seats. Please make sure we're social distancing. We need to be healthy and safe, so please take all precautions as necessary. The first thing I'd like to do is welcome a new member to the committee, Senator Simmons, who is, Senator Doty was appointed, and we have a new member to our committee. And we're glad to have her, and we won't make her sing the Mississippi song or anything like that, but if you want to, you can. But we welcome you. We're glad to have you here, and we know you're a good member and you're very intelligent, and we look forward to having you here. So thank you very much. Today's hearing and meeting really is just to get some input from the Department of Education, and we have Dr. Wright here with her staff. This year has been, in the past year, has been very challenging. For reasons everybody is aware of, and we're still in the middle of the school year, and so we have some more challenges to undergo, and there's members that have questions, parents have reached out to me, teachers, administrators, as well as all of the other legislators. So I'd want Dr. Wright to go ahead and come up to the podium, make her remarks, and any questions that any of the senators may have. Please do not hesitate to ask. Dr. Wright has always been open and transparent, and she's willing to answer any questions that we may have. So thank you, Dr. Wright. Happy New Year, and the stage is yours. Hey, Dr. Wright, if you could speak into the microphone. I think we're having some issues here. Or pull it closer. There we go. There should be a green light.
Oh, there we go. I started to say with my voice. I find that hard to believe that nobody could hear me. But once again, thank you for having me. I got several questions sent in advance, and I've prepared a presentation around those questions that I got. But after I finish, if you still have questions, we'll certainly be around to answer anything that you may have. To say that this has been an unusual year is an understatement, but I think you're going to see through my presentation that we have done a tremendous amount to help our districts through this process, and being in constant communication with superintendents, principals, teachers, and students through my Student Council Advisory Council. So as we know, we start every presentation with looking at our vision and mission. It is critical to me that we know what we're all about and where we're headed. I firmly believe that we are well on our way and have been on our way to creating a world-class educational system for our children, and we are continuing to push, maintaining that momentum, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. The State Board of Education's 6 goals focus all of our work. Those have not changed. Once we adopted those, we have been very faithful about organizing the department around that work and then organizing our resources to districts around those 6 goals, and very proud of the progress that we have made. Okay, do I need to point this some particular direction? This isn't advancing, so. Can somebody do the clicking then? Try it again? Okay. There we go. All right, we'll start with school reopening. Oops, back up. I convened a group of superintendents in a task force. They have been working since spring of last year, devising reopening plans for schools around these 6 areas, and I'm going to talk about the 7th area in just a second. But that 7th area is coming up, obviously, when summer gets here. But these superintendents worked together to produce a document, and we actually used a consultant with them as well, to give guidance to superintendents and principals about what are the things that they should be considering as they're reopening. So you can see it's in academics. Those are the kinds of considerations that need to be had. And by the way, this document is on our website, so if you ever want to go up and take a look at its specificity, it's up there as well. Operationally, you're thinking about transportation, food services, safety. Family and community support. What do our families need in order to guide them in helping children at home? Communications. You can't over-communicate in a situation like this. The more people know, the more comfortable they feel, and they feel there's a sense of knowledge that's coming to them to help them guide their work. Health and safety, obviously, in the midst of this pandemic, not only in schools, but on buses, et cetera, and what does that look like, and what do principals and superintendents need to take into consideration? And obviously, as you well know, with technology and the learning management systems, and I'm going to talk to you and give you an update on Mississippi Connects, that was huge for us. That was huge for us and for our districts. So a lot of guidance around that, and then we've been asked about summer learning, and that's going to be in the last quarter leading into summer of what that group of superintendents is going to be developing, and we'll talk about that shortly. So when we think about academic planning, one of the things that's going to be really important, and I mentioned this to you earlier, is that this task force continue to work, because a lot of districts are going to be needing some guidance on what does that look like? What does a summer learning program look like? Because we did not have as much travel this year and as much in-person, face-to-face professional development this year, we were able to save that money, and that money is going to be put out now for districts to apply to receive that money for summer programming, whether that's a reading camp, whether that's an after-school program. We're going to make those monies available to our districts since we did not spend them this year. Districts also have Title I dollars, so that's one thing they have that they can also use to spend for after-school programming and summer programming. They're getting ready to get another infusion of the CARES money. That money, as you know, was approved in December, and that's getting ready to come to the state of Mississippi. I'll be happy to give you more information on that as we get it. The chiefs are being called on a weekly basis to give us updates on what that means. But what it actually means for Mississippi is we've been told we will be receiving, K-12 will be receiving almost 4 times the amount of money that we received in the past. So I think the total amount, God bless you, the total amount is $745.6 million, I believe, and there will be more information coming to you on that. We've also been asked by teachers about should we be bothering with remediation? You know, you hear the term learning loss. I do not use the term learning loss for a very good reason, because I think it's a negative balance, if you will, and we don't want children to feel that they've done something wrong. You know, like here, we're going to teach you all the things you've lost, versus, no, we're going to accelerate your learning. That's a totally different way of looking at something. And so we've told teachers, start with grade level expectations and move from there. Because I was asked, well, should I take all of the quarter from last quarter and start at the beginning of the year? And I said, no, if you do that, you're always going to be behind. So our standards are designed in a very elegant way so that when you start teaching grade level standards, it's very easy to determine very quickly standards that children may need additional help with. So we've said, start with grade level standards and move forward. In fact, there's years of research that remediation simply does not work, A, and B, it is incredibly expensive when you start buying a tremendous amount of interventions that may or may not be needed. I have confidence that our children are going to be able to do this. I've got confidence in the teachers. We've been working with them over the past several years on how to implement our standards, and so I feel good about that. I was asked a question about kindergarten. As you know, we started the year missing about 23,000 children, and the charge to the school attendance officers was you need to go out and find them and to report back to us on a weekly basis. We have to validate, if you will, every single one of those children to find out where they were. That was big on my mind, I can tell you. That's something that woke me up at night. If they were at home schooling, fine. If they went to a private school, fine. My issue was, are they in a learning environment? Because just being at home and being of compulsory attendance age was not acceptable, and it's against the law. However, when you come to kindergarten, Mississippi does not have a compulsory attendance law in kindergarten. Our compulsory attendance law doesn't start until age 6. So these 4,400 students that didn't show up, there's not really much we can do about that because they are under a compulsory attendance age. You did, thank you for this, change the law about 2 or 3 years ago that if a parent enrolls in kindergarten, their child in kindergarten, then they are under compulsory attendance age. So that has helped tremendously, because I think initially people were thinking we had kids coming in, kids going out, kids coming in, kids going out, and there was no continuity to learning. So the legislature amended that law to say if you've enrolled in kindergarten, then you are now under compulsory attendance age. We get questions around statewide assessments and accountability. I want to start with where we were. These are good. This is the good news of where we were. We have been making tremendous progress. And you can see up until the year, this is the last year we administered our statewide assessments, all of those bars are great news for where we were. And I got to tell you, it's really incentivized a lot of people across the state because they don't want to see us go back to where we were. They want to see us continue moving these bars up even higher. Oops, this thing is sensitive. Was that? I don't have my presentation in front of me. Let me go back. So here we are, third grade assessment. You remember when you passed the law in 2013 to start in years 14, 15, we had, in order to pass the third grade reading assessment, you only had, thank you, I forgot to bring my own copy, thank you. We only had to have children pass above the lowest achievement level, meaning all they had to score was level 2 or higher. We have a 5-level system. Level 1, level 2, level 3, 4 is proficient, 5 is advanced. So if you score 4 or 5, you score either proficient or advanced. But all these kids had to do was score just over level 1. Like, that's not really a lot. So I came back to the legislature and I asked you to raise the bar. I think this was in 2016, and I said, do me a favor, we need to get closer to proficiency. I'm not saying make it 4, but let's raise it to level 3. That's closer to proficiency. Let's give the districts 3 years notice, so it wasn't like the next year, and then we're going to make sure that they had to pass at a level 3 or higher. Well, look what our kids did. I mean, a lot of people thought they would never do this well. This shows you our teachers are doing exactly what we want them to be doing, and that's teaching children to read and read proficiently. This was great news for us, and great news for us as a state. We get questions about assessments. Well, we are intending to provide the statewide assessments again this year, and for a very, very important reason. We need to know the state of education in Mississippi. It's been 2 years now. This will have been 2 full years without a statewide assessment. We need to get a lay of the land. Now, the federal law requires the statewide assessment, and the federal law also requires accountability, that the accountability models be run. So until we hear anything differently from the United States Department of Ed under the new administration, we're going to continue, I'm going to set this thing down. We're going to continue administering our statewide assessments. Now, it may not look like the same statewide assessment that we've always known. The law requires that we have at least 95% participation. The chiefs around the nation have already made it known to USED, there's no way that we're going to come up with 95% of our kids being tested, because we don't have the ability right now to test remotely. It costs a lot of money with all the security that you have to put in place to test remotely. But what we can do is test the children that we have in school. So all of the chiefs have really put a lot of pressure, quite honestly, on USED to say, let's look at this 95%. Let's at least give us the opportunity to provide the assessments and not be dinged for it, but to be able to use that for me as a department head to say, okay, to my team, here are the areas that we saw that were weaker. Here's the resources we need to provide. Here's the professional development we need to provide. And so we need that information coming back. Accountability is a little bit different. A lot of people lump accountability in with assessment, but it's 2 different things. Assessments are a part of the accountability model. They feed into the model, but so does graduation rate, so does growth, so does the acceleration component, so does college and career readiness. So we have to administer, until we hear otherwise, the accountability we run the accountability model. But we are making a recommendation, and I'm making this public. In fact, we're putting out a press release today on this. I am making a recommendation to you and to the governor to not require that children pass the third grade reading assessment this year. I do believe this needs to be a year of grace for our schools and for our teachers and for our children. There's a lot of pressure on this around this assessment, but not knowing that we've had a standard way of instructing children to hold children accountable for that, I do not feel is fair. The same, I believe, is true for our high school end of year and end of course assessments. So that is a recommendation that we are making. Now, as far as accountability is concerned, we are working with our technical advisory committee, a brilliant group of people, to try to figure out how can we meet the letter of the law, the federal law around accountability, and not have to hold the whole thing, the way we've put it into ESSA, the way our accountability model currently is in ESSA, the same way. So I am also making a recommendation that districts and schools just continue with the same grade they have into the 2021 school year, so that they not be, we run the model, but we not then hold them accountable for that letter grade, just as we wouldn't be holding children accountable for passing that. Now, let me be also very clear. I'm talking about this for 1 year. That's it. So when fall comes, as far as I'm concerned, we're back to business as usual. But I think in this year, we need to give grace to our schools and our districts for the amount of work that we are putting in. Now, we are waiting for the USAID to issue new regulations. We have been told that there may be new regulations coming. There may be waivers coming that we don't know about yet. So I want you to know that as soon as I know, you'll know. But right now, they've drawn a line in the sand about not accepting waivers for assessments and not accepting waivers for accountability models. So that's kind of where we are with assessments. And if you've got a question while I'm rolling along, do you want me to stop while I'm that, or you want to wait till the end? How do you feel about that?
It really doesn't matter. You may ask questions at any time. They can feel free to stop and ask. One of the questions I had,
sure,
if you don't mind, Dr. Wright, is we're going to do the assessments and so forth. What is, I think you might have skimmed over this or mentioned it, what if we find a child that's in third grade and doesn't do so well on the third grade test? Mm-hmm. What's the recommendation from the department going to be to help get that child to the next level?
Well, you raise
really?
Absolutely. You raise a really good question, because as you know, our law also has good cause exemption. So you can have a child that is still not passing the third grade assessment, but if they meet a good cause exemption, they're still passed on to fourth grade, even though they're still reading below grade level. So what we've done in the past, and it's a really good question, we've provided professional development to our fourth grade teachers around how do you deal with the number of children, if there are a large number, that are moving forward that are not prepared for fourth grade work. What do you do with them? What are the interventions that you put in place? And so that's something that we will continue to do and continue to offer. Right now, all of our PD pretty much is virtual, but we are looking as spring comes and the vaccinations come through to start back up with some of our in-face, if you will, face-to-face professional development, but that is something very specifically that we have developed modules for.
And it really is not just limited to third graders. It could be
that's exactly right.
Fifth grader, sixth grader, and I think you mentioned the summer program.
That's right.
Would be a key to that. Could you further explain what you meant by that and how the summer programs could help maybe not do remediation, but get get that student up to grade level?
Good question. A lot of our districts already offer summer programmings. A lot of them offer summer reading camps, and they typically identify those children that are struggling the most. If you remember when I was here the last time, and we talked about the year-round calendar, those intersessions where you can also offer summer programming for kids that are accelerated, right? So there's nothing to prevent schools from doing both. Those children that need the extra help in terms terms of reading or mathematics or whatever it might be, and those children that may need more advanced work, during the summer, so that they can continue to learn, during the summer. But every school in every district makes its own decision about that, and about who's invited, I assume by invited, like who's invited to attend. I don't know off the top of my head of a district that's requiring that, but I can tell you that most parents take advantage of it if a summer program or an after-school program is being offered. Schools also can apply for Title IV money, and that's where your after-school dollars are concerned, so they can also apply for Title IV money for after-school programming. Did that help? Okay. Let's talk about Mississippi Connect. So first, before we even get started, let me just say thank you for the $200 million that was appropriated by this legislature, because we could not have done what we have done had that not happened. So the collaboration between the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, the office of the state auditor, our ed chairs, I can't tell you what a collaborative effort this was to get this pulled off. So here are the five major components of it that we have been working on since you passed the bill in July. The contracts were signed mid to late August, and voila, by the middle of November, it all arrived. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So obviously you think about devices, meaning laptops and tablets. Those were already, when they got delivered, many of you attended. Thank you for that, because it was an exciting time, and if you had the opportunity, you saw the excitement in children and teachers' faces. Because once they opened the box, the laptop was ready to roll. It had all the security, all the software. We arranged that in a huge warehouse here in Jackson, and so when the laptops came in, they were unboxed, all that stuff was loaded, a hard case was put on them, put back in the box, and then each bundle then was sent to across the state to each district. Along with that, we have been looking at a way to ensure that children now have high-quality instructional materials to load onto that. Not every district had a learning management system, and I think this is important. A learning management system, for those of you that don't know, is a platform inside that you can load high-quality instructional materials onto that children can then download onto their laptops, and even if they're not connected to the internet, for whatever reason at home, they still have access to it. So that's going to continue to be a huge need. Connectivity, obviously, with House Bill 1788, that was the $50 million appropriation. Connectivity is going to continue to be an issue for the nation. And I can tell you that we have been in conversations with Senator Wicker's office about this, since he chairs Commerce. This broadband and continuing with broadband and connectivity is not just a one-time fix. And I know that you also gave money to the commissioners for broadband, et cetera. That's a great start, but know that this is going to continue to be an issue around our state and around our nation, because all the chiefs are talking about the exact same thing. We knew, and we started in the spring, but more than that, doubled down in the fall, that professional development was going to be needed. And talking to my teachers on the Teacher Advisory Council, I can tell you in spring, the conversation was very different than it was in fall. In spring, it was, oh my gosh, this is just overwhelming. Like, I didn't know that I was going to have to learn to use all this. I wish I'd known all this before I started. In fall, greater level of confidence in what they're doing and how they're deploying it. But they still need help in making sure that they know not only just the technology itself, but how do you use that in an instructional way all year long? Forget the pandemic. The pandemic is going to end, but instructional technology can continue, so we're focusing on that. And last but not least is telehealth and teletherapy. We were hearing loud and clear from our teachers, our parents, and our students. The Student Advisory Council, I gotta tell you, is very vocal about the number of kids that they knew that were really depressed at having to be at home and not with their friends. So I've been working with the medical community since spring of last year. Mississippi Medical Center, UMMC, the Academy of Pediatrics, the Family Physicians Association, the Health Department, and last but not least, certainly Medicaid. So we all have been meeting together to think about what does this look like, how do we deploy it, so that we can get health and physicians in need out into the areas of our state that may not have enough physicians. We all know that pediatricians are a real necessity, and yet we don't have enough of them. We don't have enough mental health therapists around our state. But if we could bring that to those children and those families in a way that telehealth and teletherapy can provide, that can solve a lot of issues. So we are still working on that and hope to get that up and running by late spring. Here we go. I want you to know we're very proud of this. We are the only state in the nation that pulled off this comprehensive initiative. The only state in the nation. And that is something that is a real talking point. Because I can tell you that we're getting calls from other states around how did you pull this off and how did you do this? And it was such a collaborative effort. The Alliance for Nonprofits also helped pay for a consultant that could work with us on this. It was just everybody came together when they saw what was happening with the digital divide in Mississippi, and we had the money to do it. We wanted to be thoughtful about it. So the two bills that you passed, I cannot say enough about. We could never have done this if we had not had this level of support. So I want you to also see how it was spent. So on Senate Bill 3044, we had 148 of the 150 districts that wanted to purchase devices. Some had already purchased them, so they decided not to. We purchased 390,000 devices. I mean, let me just stop right there. 390,000 devices came into Mississippi and were configured in exactly the way that I just said to you. We were ahead of California. We were ahead of all the other states. In fact, all the other states were waiting. Their laptops were still overseas, while ours had already been flown into the United States. So that is significant. 325,000 of those were purchased off our state bulk purchasing program, and that put us at the head of the line. I mean, we were here to buy 325,000 of them. 65,000 the districts bought on their own. They did not buy through bulk purchasing, so they had the ability to do either, and that's how it fell out. As of today, we have expended 98.6% of the $147 million that we were given. And so that's a pretty significant thing to say. All the districts have been reimbursed. When we finished with the delivery, we immediately pivoted to the reimbursement process. And to say that that was quite an undertaking was quite an undertaking. We were kind enough also to the lieutenant governor was also kind enough to offer to help pay for some additional people, and that was much needed because it was just we didn't have the capacity to with all of that to do that. So I want to thank the lieutenant governor, for his kindness there. The House bill, we had 144 of the districts participating, including the Choctaw Tribal Schools, and we had 31 of the 121 independent schools who also participated, because that was also a provision of that bill. And right now we have spent 78.9% of that money, which was $39,427,000 of the $50 million appropriation. Most of these purchases went to hotspots. Some went to fiber optic cable, and a few districts even built cell towers. They built cell towers so that they could have connectivity in areas of the district that they right now they didn't have. So this has gone. I mean, to say this has gone a long way is really an understatement. Let's talk for a second about professional development, because we were saying the question that came in was, how's MDE helping the districts? What are we providing the districts to help them through this whole process? So we had about 14,000, a little bit more than 14,000 teachers that were participating in our PD. Since the 19-20 school year only, we gave 468 sessions out. Some of those were face-to-face, some of those were online. Since the year has started, an additional 2,000 educators have received customized training at their request. But that is something that I am a firm believer of, is building the capacity of teachers, of teachers and leaders, because I think that's the secret to our success and has been the secret to our success over the years. We have given teachers the skills that they need and the resources that they need to do what they are required to do, which is making sure that children are getting a sound education. And that's our job as the department, is to continue to push out those resources. This whole thing wants to work when it wants to work. Here we go. Oops, back up. So I talked to you a little bit about social emotional learning. We just now were bringing to the board, actually in our January board meeting, it's already been out for APA, we got feedback on that, our social emotional learning standards. And these are standards that are helping children, addressing children, the whole child, all of the needs of the child, because we did hear a lot of kids were really struggling emotionally. We also knew from Child Protective Services that even child abuse reporting dropped off significantly, and so that was a concern that it could be going on, but it wasn't, since we weren't in school, it wasn't being reported. These also assist staff in their daily classroom. I didn't want this to be an add-on. I wanted this to be infused in what they're learning. So teachers don't need one more thing on their plate. And so the guidance that we've put out and the guides that we're putting out show them how to infuse these kinds of learnings in their everyday practice. And we will continue to provide, obviously, professional development where that is concerned. We also partnered with MPB. Actually, they set up a brand new channel. It's every day at 7 a.m. We've got some amazing teachers that volunteer to have lessons recorded. All of the lessons align to our standards, and so in several content areas. And anybody that has a television can log on and get that learning at any point in time during the day. And MPB, we've got several partners, and I want to recognize them as well. The next one I want to recognize is Mississippi First. They partnered with us. This is a brand new website for Mississippi teachers on high quality instructional materials, and that is a key to teachers making sure that they're using materials of high quality. Its website is called MississippiInstructionalMaterials.org. And you can access that at any point in time. And I think that all of our materials have been added, except English Language Arts is going to be added in 2021. So we've worked really hard, and Mississippi First has been a great partner with us as well. We have our own website. There we go. And that is a hub for all teachers to know what is available to them, either right now online. All of the things that we're offering are research-based. All of the things that we're offering are aligned to our standards. So we wanted teachers to have a go-to place to be able to pull stuff down, whether it's around high-quality instructional materials, because what the teachers were saying is, I'm pulling this off the internet, I'm pulling this off the internet, and rightfully so, because that's all they had. But now we want them to be thinking, okay, if I pulled it down, is it of high quality, and is it of the rigor that we want, and is it aligned to our standards? There we go. These are brand new resources that we pushed out to the districts this year. These are instructional planning guides, grades K through 12 in math, ELA, and science. These are amazing guides. These are guides full of lessons and resources and ideas in each of those content areas that teachers can just pick up and use immediately. We even had a pre-K through grade 12 arts education guidance that we put out so that could be employed as well. And the last thing that not the last, but these are the ones I'm highlighting, there's more behind this, but the equipped book list we're really proud of. That was a book list that was put together using teachers and staff to really address a lot of the social issues that were occurring around our nation. And so inside, when you look at that, and all these are on our website, they're really, really cool. They'll tell you a summary, they'll tell you a Lexile, level, and it will also tell you a little bit about how it to be used or where it's to be used. So, and this is something that we've worked very hard on and will continue to work hard on because we want to make sure that it gets through all grade 12 and all subject, and it's a cross-subject area. Strong readers, strong leaders. We revamped this website. This is for parents. This is amazing. Right now, it's for parents birth through grade 5, and it's great. You can go in and click on it. You can click on the age or the grade that you want, and it will give developmentally appropriate exercises for parents to do with their children at home or in the grocery store or wherever they happen to be. But it's all focused on making sure that parents have the resources that they need to help children at home. I was asked also, what legislative needs and funding needs do we at MDE need? So let me start by something that you know is very near and dear to my heart, and that is early childhood education. We need to expand early childhood education. The research is so strong around this, it is just irrefutable. We now know longitudinally children that attend a high-quality preschool are more likely to be reading on grade level by the end of grade 3, more likely to graduate from high school on time, more likely to be employed with a sustainable wage, less likely to be involved with the law, less likely to be involved with drugs, et cetera, et cetera. So this sets children up for success. And you know and I know, and I didn't bring that slide, but our collaboratives are knocking it out of the park. They're the kids that are coming into kindergarten more than ready for kindergarten. So imagine if we had all these little ones who, and we put those collaboratives deliberately in areas that were underserved. So I need to say that as well. So it's not like we picked and chose where we wanted to put these collaboratives. We put them where we knew they were needed. And they have done an amazing job. And the National Institute of Early Educational Research has recognized Mississippi for the past 5 years. This year we were only one of 4 that met all 10 quality standards. So we know what to do. We just need more money to establish more collaboratives. We need, yes sir, I'm sorry. Sure. Sure. I can get you a map to show you where they are, and when we get money, what we do is we put out an application and people apply, and I can tell you that we always have more applications than we have money. And so we try to make sure that we look at the data that surrounds the area too, because if those are schools that are low performing, that's a perfect place to put a collaborative so that we can start that move through the system of stronger children. And we've done that. That's been our practice. So if you can make a note, somebody can make a note that we'll get you a map of exactly where they are located right now. But that's been our practice. So whenever you give us money, we put out the applications, we let people apply, and then we award based on the data that are surrounding that. We definitely could use more literacy
Dr. Wright?
coaches.
I'm sorry, Dr.
Sure,
Wright,
I'm sorry.
just on that, to follow up Senator Jordan, is there not a waiting list for the collaboratives?
Yes.
And there's already collaboratives that have met the parameters, and they're just waiting on the legislature to appropriate additional money so that they can be brought online. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what you have seen is that these collaboratives are learning from each other and getting I guess, good information, all of that. So more and more are wanting to come on board to meet these guidelines or
That's
to
right.
do the collaboratives. Is that right?
That's exactly right. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because about 4 years ago, I changed right after we had started the collaboratives actually, I changed the kindergarten enrollment form. And I'm now asking parents when you enroll in kindergarten, where was your child as a 4-year-old? Because then when the kindergarten readiness assessment is administered in the fall, I can disaggregate that data and know, were you in one of our collaboratives? Were you in a private pre-K? Were you at home? Were you in a daycare? Or were you in Head Start? And then I have the ability to see how those kids are coming in. And that's why I'm saying all of our collaboratives are scoring above the cut to be ready for kindergarten. So we're servicing around, in our collaboratives, around 3,300 children. We do have districts that have established their own pre-K classes, and they too are functioning under the same standards that we're using for our collaboratives. We have opened up our professional development to anybody across the state that touches 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds for free. So even if you are in a Head Start or a daycare and we're offering professional development, there's no pay for you to come in and learn alongside our teachers. But we have so many people that are anxious to have these collaboratives, and it just kind of breaks your heart because the interest is there, but the money is what's needed.
And so just to tie that in a bow to Senator Jordan's point, that if we, the legislature, appropriate that, then these that are on the wait list can get funded and come on board. And so these places that need that, I mean, they're already there, and we can bring them on board and then plan for others that may come through this.
We
through
can
the
bring
application
on
process.
board as much money as you give us. I mean, and I do mean that honestly. I'm not just saying that. I can tell you that Alabama has I think their latest piece of legislation was somewhere between $150 and $160 million for early childhood. So people around us are doing this, and it's a known quantity, right? It's not something that we have to experiment with. Well, is it going to work or is it not going to work? No, we've got a track record of this working, and our teachers have done an amazing job, because when we started this out, there was a lot of uncertainty, right, around what am I supposed to be doing, what am I supposed to be teaching, and we all came together and provided professional development that was the same strong early childhood programming, and now we are being recognized nationally because of it. And so, and hats off to the legislation that got passed, because people have been calling us, and you know this as well, Senator, people are calling us and saying, let me see the legislation and how can we get that in our state, because that's something that we need. The same thing with the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. We could use more literacy coaches. I can tell you that teachers and schools are asking, these coaches are doing an amazing job. And when you disaggregate our data, you can tell that the schools that are supported by our literacy coaches are doing better than those that are not. And so I think that's something, in fact, I've got to tell you quite honestly, I've got principals and superintendents that are saying, can you give us math coaches? Right? We love our literacy coaches and we love to have a math coach. So they work with teachers to teach teachers best practices around literacy, and it's paying off. So we could definitely use more money for that. I mentioned to you high quality instructional materials. I would love money to be able to buy high quality instructional materials, because now with what you've done with your $200 million, I can buy the software, I can push that out across the state to every single device. So it's not going to be a matter of having to give it to every single district to have them do that. We have the ability now to push that out across the state. So we could definitely use money for that. And certainly last but not least, I've asked for this every year. I am begging you again this year, we have got to have money to upgrade our student information system. I mean, it is beyond critical right now. And those are our priorities. Obviously, you know that we totally support full funding for MAEP. That goes without saying. But if you're asking me, if I'm looking at vision for the next year, these are the areas that I feel are really critical for the department. And the last slide I have, you had a question about ADA. That's been, as you know, MAEP has a portion of its formula that is based on ADA. So we ran this 3 different ways for you. We ran it using fiscal year 22 ADA. We ran it using a 3-year average of ADA, and we ran it using a fiscal year 21 ADA. And you can see the results there on the screen of what that would mean, the differences in MA. Of course, this is full funding request. This would be, we ran it based on full funding. There's a lot of concern, and rightfully so, around the state by the superintendents about the children that they've lost. But I fully expect, as do they, that they're going to return. I think that once we get past the vaccination phase and once we get past the issues around the pandemic, I fully expect these children to return. We started out with 23,000. I think our last number, we're down to about 800 children that we're still looking for, but all of those other children have been accounted for. And I can't say enough to our school attendance officers for the work that they've done, the districts and the teachers, home calls, home visits, to try and make sure that we've got these kids, because I think there's a lot of fear as well, we all know, that's still out there, that parents are probably keeping their kids home because of that. But I think once we can get back to a little bit where people are less fearful about letting their children come into school, I do think that you're going to see a lot of these kids flood back in. So if you're asking me for a recommendation, I would be looking at your 3-year average, because I think that takes into account the ups and downs over a 3-year period of time and not just looking solely at 1 year. That being said, I would love for us to have a discussion during the legislative session about moving away from ADA and moving to average daily membership. Average daily membership is where we need to be. Those are kids that are there, they're registered, because on ADA, as you well know and I know, when you come in to pull ADA, if kids are absent, then they're not taken into account. But if you're talking about ADM, then it doesn't make any difference when you pull that data, because the schools still have to accommodate all the kids they have registered. They still have to pay the teachers for all the teachers that they have. So the ADA, to me, is not as reliable as an average daily membership. And I'd love to have that conversation with you during the legislative session. And that ends my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Wright. Before we get to questions, it's my understanding that the slides are not being seen on the YouTube videos.
Oops.
The slides will be posted on the legislative website where the agendas are posted. So for those of you listening in, those will be posted later. We apologize for the technical error, as we are all learning in this era that we have. I'd like to open up for questions. Senator McClendon, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Wright, for all you've done during this time, and our school districts and our teachers. I have two questions. I believe you answered one with the new CARES Act money
Yes, sir.
coming. After December 31st, teachers are having to use sick time if they have a COVID issue, their family members, whatnot. You look for that to be taken care of in this CARES Act, the second round.
Well, not quite. So let me. I'm going to ask Joe Goff, who is my chief counsel and chief for advocacy. This is his wheel well, so I want him to answer that specific question.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. So Leah and I, we were discussing this issue earlier, and as far as the
Could you
leave
speak
issues,
into the mic clearly for us there?
I'm sorry. So as far as the leave issues for district staff, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, it expired the end of December, and this was a federal law that was passed back in March that was applicable to districts and also, of course, for state employees that granted 80 hours of leave for certain COVID-related reasons. The law expired the end of December. This is an issue also as far as state employees and the state agencies out there also. It's a pretty hot topic, I can tell you, as far as state agencies are concerned. As far as leave in these circumstances, the legislature back in March passed House Bill 1647. It's very similar. In fact, it tracks the same language as 25-392, which is the code section that allows for certain administrative leave to be granted by an agency appointing authority in emergency circumstances. The State Personnel Board last week issued an email to all state agencies and agency heads where they stated that now that the Coronavirus Response Act, FFCRA, has expired, we were going to revert back, state agencies were to revert back to pre-COVID leave regulations, personal leave, major medical leave, but in addition, in certain circumstances that may qualify, administrative leave for employees in emergency circumstances. So again, the legislature passed for school district staff, HB 1647 last year. It tracks that same language that allows for certain additional leave entitlements that can be granted to employees in emergency circumstances. So I don't know if that was, but it's up to each individual district. Okay.
So this would allow each individual school district at their discretion to allow teachers off if they test positive for COVID with pay.
That's correct.
And they would not have to use their own personal leave or not get paid at all. Is that?
That's correct. It's up to each individual district how they would address that. Again, the staff, they accumulate their own personal and major medical leave, just like state employees also. I know that at the Department of Education, if we have an employee that has been exposed in the workplace, and we're mandating that they go home and quarantine, in that circumstance, again, it was no fault of their own. It's really unfair to require that they have to use their own accumulated personal major medical leave. That certainly would be something that under 25-392, Dr. Wright has the authority to grant administrative leave. And HB 1647, it grants that similar authority.
Chair, speak to them about what the new changes in the new CARES Act, because that's confusing. It looks like it's extending it too much.
That's right. So there's been some confusion because in the new CARES Act, you may have seen headlines that at the FFCRA that it was extended through the end of March. That is only really for the private sector, and it's on a voluntary basis in the private sector for businesses to get certain tax relief and tax benefits if they allow that previous leave of the 80 hours of COVID leave for their employees to comply with that. So it's strictly on a voluntary basis, but it's caused some confusion because it looks like it was extended through the end of March, but it was not.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was on the devices. Should school districts start planning now? Do we have a life expectancy of these devices? Do we look for these to replace books? And when should they start, planning for the future for these? Obviously now, I would assume.
Yeah, it's a good question.
DeSoto County schools have estimated theirs will be $6 million.
Our devices are covered through 2023, so they've got a 3-year coverage on them, 24-hour break replace system. So ours are good, the ones that we've just purchased are good for 3 years, the ones that were purchased through us. I do think that, and some districts have already decided, had refreshed already, and that's the reason they didn't participate in Senate Bill 3044. But if you're looking out past 3 years, it's really debatable about which year. Do you refresh at 3? Do you refresh at 5? And I think that's going to kind of depend on, the device that you've purchased and how well they're holding up and what that looks like. But I do think that that's something that we need to be thinking about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Jordan? Yes, I've got a question. Senator Jordan, if you could speak into your mic. I don't think it's turned on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Jordan, your microphone's not turned on.
I know, they're not that easy to turn on. You got it?
Let Christie look at it. There we go.
That's it. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, before you turn your chart off, I was looking at MAEP, and you had over $2 billion, and you talked about 2.4, and our budget usually run about $6 billion for the state appropriation. And I was just wondering, we haven't funded education, not that it doesn't need it, but we haven't spent that much money in education out of budget that is a little over $6 billion, state funds I have reference to, because the MAEP have only been funded, 2 times since we have inherited, and so therefore we need to, and we should, and we must put more money into public education to get done what is needed to elevate our educational system, to bring it in line with adjacent states. And I hope we are able to do that. That's all. I was just wanting to let you know that you're taking a third of the budget appropriation from the state of Mississippi, but that's okay with me for education.
Well, we appreciate that, and hopefully you've seen a return on your investment is what I'm hoping over the past few years. And those figures are for full funding, even though we know that it hasn't been full funded. The figures that you have in your PowerPoint are full funding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Norwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Wright. And I have just a few questions. First of all, your presentation, would it be available on MDE website?
We'll be happy to put it up there.
Okay. All right. And I don't.
It's going to be on the legislature's website as well? Okay.
Yeah, Senator Norwood, it'll be on the legislative website as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. But I was just talking about for those. And I'm glad to hear one of my concerns was ADM, and I'm glad to hear your opinion on that. My third concern is the 23,000 students that's now
Correct.
800 students.
Yes, sir.
Do we have, are the districts required to submit, I guess, a plan? Because if those students have been out of an education environment for some time. Are they required to submit any type of plan to help catch those students up with the learning that they may
Well,
have-
we've not done that, but I do know that that's on everybody's mind. I can tell you that that is first and foremost about what happens when all these kids return. But some of them are in learning environments, so let me be very clear. There were a whole, we've got a breakdown at the department of exactly how many moved out of state, how many went to homeschool. We had a jump in homeschool enrollment. How many of them, I'm sorry? Did I say private schools? I'm sorry. How many were in private schools? I mean, all that breakdown, the districts are required to let us know, these children didn't show up, and here's the reason why. And if they didn't show up and we had no reason, then we had to go out and find those children to find out why they were not in school. And some moved beyond compulsory age, right? So they just decided not to return. But we've got all of that, and I can certainly give you that breakdown.
So the 23,000 is not just students that were not in a learning environment, that encompasses all of those.
We had almost 23,000 students that we had enrolled in the spring that did not come back in the fall. And so that was my charge to the school attendance officers. You need to find every single one of those children and make sure that they're in some kind of learning environment. And so that was their task, and so they did. They've now found all but about 800, and they're still looking for those 800. But sometimes it gets difficult because if a parent moves out of state, and even though the school knows that, if the state that they moved into does not request the records, there's not like an official way to validate that, then that child remains unvalidated. So there's a lot of nuances that go into that, but our school attendance officers have really, and districts and schools, I've really got to say everybody, this has been a yeoman's effort to try and make sure that we're finding all of these children.
Okay, and I would like to have that because I think I have more questions for my district.
I can do that. I can do that.
you
Happy to
very
do that.
Senator Blunt, I believe, has some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Wright, first, I think I heard, can you give us any more information about the most recent federal virus stimulus package that was passed in late December, and what money would be available for K-12 and what it's for? And whether or not we as a legislature need to take any action to deal with any of that
I don't
money.
believe so. We have received, I've got K-12s in front of me. I don't have, there's the same monies that are coming out, but we got a bigger, K-12 got a bigger portion nationally. When I say we, K-12 nationally got a bigger portion than did IHL and did the governor. So the governor's still going to have his money coming in. I think if memory serves, it's around $4 billion, not for Mississippi nationally, so whatever his portion would be, wouldn't that be nice? And then our money that is coming into us, we will be receiving, K-12 will be receiving $724,532,847. And so the way that the feds have done it this time is the same way that they did it the last time. It's proportioned based on Title I. So Dr. Gavin's office will then be running those numbers proportionally based on Title I, the Title I formula, just like we did the last time. And those monies then will be pushed out to the districts. Now, there are, as I understand it, I've only been through one webinar, so you're going to have to pardon me because we have not received all of the information yet from USED. But as I understand it, there is more flexibility with this money than in the past. I've also been told that this is the largest amount of money that K-12 nationally has ever received in the history of the United States. There is also money included nationally. I want to say off the top of my head, it was about $2.5 billion for broadband. Now, how that's going to be distributed and who that's going to be given to, I don't know. These are monies that are above and beyond the money that I just gave you. But the districts will have more flexibility. There are no equitable services required as there was the last time. And I don't know how I don't know all the details. I can give you high level, but we're expected to have this money. It was passed December 27th, I want to say, and we were told by USED in a call yesterday that this money should be to us within a week. So that's going to give us a chance then to push it into our system. calculate what gets pushed out, and then push that out to the district. And I believe that money is now extended to 2023, this money that's new for spending. So they will have a little bit longer to spend that. And we will obviously be offering a lot of suggestions around, it's obviously it's going to be up to the districts, but we're going to say, if we were in your spot, to your point, Senator, earlier, here's some things that you may want to be thinking about as we move forward. So as I get more information, more than happy to update you on that. But I do know that there's the 3 buckets of money are still coming to our state. But this was only for K-12, what I just told you.
Well, there are other reasons, of course, while we've considered pushing back this session for a little bit and not finishing on the 1st of April, but it seems to me that if we're on the traditional 90-day session with the sine die around the 1st of April, and we've got the most money ever in the history of the federal government coming down here to K-12 education, that it's going to put your team and us in a situation where we're running our usual deadlines over here, and we've got this money, and we need to decide how best to have our local district spend it. So I'm sure this will be an ongoing conversation between this committee and Senator Hobson's committee, because I think we would want to have some input on how that money is dispersed. And I know you're just learning about this, but we'll just have to build that plane while we're flying it over here.
Well, and we're relying, the Council of Chief State School Officers, oops, well, maybe that would have fixed them. Sorry about that. Maybe this will fix the clicker, sorry. Now that it's in parts.
That's coming out of your budget.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we'll pay for it. The Council of Chief State School Officers is in the process of analyzing the law now that it's passed. I mean, we had a webinar in December, but that was before it was passed, and I'm sure there's been some nuances since then. But SREB is also doing an analysis of the law, and so when we get all of that together, because I want to be able to tell the districts, here's what was required, here's now what's required, and to give them a sense of timeline and a sense of, we need to take advantage of this. This is a huge, like we did with the $200 million. I mean, that was a huge piece for us. I mean, we took advantage of it, and your leadership really needs to be commended for that, because you didn't have to do that, but you did. And now you've set up Mississippi nationally in a position we never would have been in. And our districts are so thankful, and our teachers and our students and our parents are so thankful. And I just think when you have this influx of money, you need to be thoughtful about it. It's a huge fiduciary responsibility that we have as citizens. And so, I'm going to offer as many suggestions as I can that I think are going to fit in with what we're trying to get achieved here in Mississippi with literacy and numeracy, and making sure that children are college and career ready, and making sure that they're graduating ready to go to work if that's what they want to do. And that's what all this money is about. And so that's really where I'm coming from.
Well, I'm sure that's where we're coming from too.
Absolutely.
I don't want to take up all the time with questions, but 2 other things real quickly.
Sure.
I mentioned to you my interest in the teacher shortage in the state.
Yes.
Which is severe and projected to get worse. And one solution that occurs to me, and I would love to hear your input on this, is how easy it is for a teacher who is licensed in another state to come to Mississippi and teach in a Mississippi school. Do we
yes.
have reciprocity, and what are the burdens and barriers that teacher has to overcome to go to work on a permanent basis in a Mississippi public school?
Well, they automatically get a license here, and I believe the time period is 3 years, I want to say. 3 years to meet any other requirements that Mississippi may have put on that, either legislatively or through board policy. But we do have a lot of teachers that come here through the reciprocity piece. So that is an ongoing thing. It's easy to do. It's not a difficult process at all.
How difficult is it within that 3 years to meet those additional requirements? And if they don't, then presumably their other out-of-state license, they're no longer licensed at that point unless they meet those state requirements. And what are those?
Well, the other thing that you need to know, we've instituted a couple of different initiatives, and thanks to our partners at Kellogg for that. We've got a performance-based initiative going on right now, which gets the ability for teachers to become teachers in in a totally different pathway. We've got a teacher residency program that they're paying for that allows people to come in and be resident teachers, if you will, that Kellogg is paying for their tuition, and so that when they graduate, they can become teachers here in Mississippi. I think the other thing that we need to be thinking about, and we are at the department, how do we take advantage of the amazing teachers, now that we have all this technology, how do we take advantage of these amazing teachers who might be willing to teach another class clear across the state, because we've already given the teacher units to that district, right? But they can't find that Algebra 1 teacher for whatever reason. But I've got an amazing Algebra 1 teacher here who would be willing to take on another class, and I can coordinate that class. Then why don't we give part of that teacher's salary that we couldn't find to that teacher as a reward for taking on an additional group of children, and she's more than willing to do that. When I mentioned this to my Teachers Advisory Council, they were thrilled about the idea of being able to possibly earn an additional stipend, and more than that, to be able to service another group of children. So I think we're trying to think out of the box too, that differently than we have in the past, because as you know, our schools of education are not producing the number of educators that we need, but we're not the only state that's having that same issue. I mean, in the past 5 years, I believe the statistic that was shared at the Education Achievement Council was our enrollment in our educator prep programs has dropped by 40% in the past 5 years. So we've got to be thinking differently than the traditional way of coming up through schools. And we've looked at our reciprocity to make sure that there aren't additional burdens, but we also want to make sure that we are also getting teachers of quality in our classroom.
And one more question real quick, and this may be a yes or no answer, but I'm happy to hear any answer that you care to give. Are the teachers in the public schools of this state engaged in the indoctrination of far-left socialist teachings that emphasize America's shortcomings over the exceptional achievements of this country? Is that happening in our Mississippi schools?
Let me put it to you this way. That's not in our standards to be taught.
Yeah. So if to your knowledge it's not happening, and
Not
if it
unless
is
I
happening,
get a
it's in
complaint about it.
violation against the stated policies of this state.
Our standards our social studies standards are right up on the web, and you can pull those standards down by grade to know exactly what the standards are. And if somebody, I can't sit here, we've got 35, 36, 38,000 teachers. I can't sit here and definitively tell you what any given one of them is
Right,
doing.
of course.
But if I get a complaint about it, and I do get complaints,
Sure.
I will then notify the respective superintendent or the respective principal and say, here's the complaint we've received, and then it's up to the local superintendent or principal to investigate and to do whatever disciplinary action that they feel is needed.
But you're not aware of any targeted campaign from foreign and domestic influences aiming to destroy the pillars of our society and our public schools?
No,
Okay, thank you.
no.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. Just to follow up on this reciprocity question, I think we all, the senators, have had questions or from constituents or teachers who've had issues trying to get their license through reciprocity. And what I think we'd like to see is what are the barriers.
Sure.
It's my belief that if they're licensed in another state and they meet the character and fitness standards, they should be granted a license immediately and be allowed to teach, whether it's there shouldn't be a year limit on it. And so I've asked Pete and I've talked about how we can eliminate those barriers, whatever they may be. But if they're licensed in another state and the shortage that we have, and they meet the character and fitness standards,
Absolutely.
they should be allowed to teach here. And
Absolutely.
grant that
And what we
license. 'Cause
try
I think
to-
we're losing too many people, just in my experience, in my short, limited experience, so.
Well, we've tried to improve the technology use to make it easier, to submit and easier to get a response back. We do monitor those very carefully, and I can tell you that we also make sure that they're valid, because the other part that we've had most recently in spring, and it was a handful, that faked everything that they sent us. And it looked suspicious when it came in, and when we started investigating, found out, yes, indeed, they had fabricated everything they'd sent in. So we do our due diligence on that end, particularly if we see that something is strange. But typically, most everybody that applies through reciprocity is automatically administered a license, unless there's something that they're lacking. But if they've got a valid license, we give them a valid license.
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
Senator Boyd, if you have some questions.
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about those school districts that are doing 100% remote learning and haven't gone back. How many districts do we have in the state that have done 100% remote learning?
We polled the districts, let me make sure I've got picturing the numbers. We polled the districts in December, I believe, about what they were doing now and what they intended to do in at the return of school. And the numbers of total virtual schools, the percentage went down. I think it was from 8 to 6% is what I want to say. Don't quote me on that, but I've got the figure back at the office. And the number of those that went from virtual to in-person went up. So more schools were planning to bring children back in person.
Do those schools that are still 100% virtual, do they have plans? Are their plans flexible, or they're saying they're just going virtual for the rest of the semester, or is there a plan as students get vaccinated, as teachers get vaccinated, that they have a plan that they will then go back to in-person learning?
I think you're going to see a lot more schools once I think the vaccinations get through, once our COVID numbers start trying to drop. I know that's a concern that Dr. Dobbs has.
Right.
I think that once we see that, I think you're going to see more people returning to in-school. That's the sense that I get. In fact, I've scheduled a call with Dr. Dobbs and all the superintendents on Monday so that they can start talking about those kinds of things and asking him directly about that. It's my understanding, and I was asked about the vaccinations, but to be honest with you, that's not my bailiwick. But after a conversation with Dr. Dobbs, and he said he's following CDC's guidelines around the groups that are being vaccinated, so the 1A, 1B, 1C, and teachers are in the 1B group. So once he gets through 1A, then now how that will look, I don't know, because we've not had that level of conversation. I was just asking because I knew the vaccinations were coming in.
Well, and to follow up with that, one of the reasons I'm asking that is because probably I know y'all mentioned doing some type of testing late spring just to get
Yes,
kind of a baseline
correct.
as to where we are. Obviously, that would have to be in person.
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the questions, how feasibly that's done if we have still
Yep.
a number of school districts that are completely remote.
Well, and that's a concern that I have. I mean, we want to try and test as many children as we can to see, just to get a lay of the land. And that is a concern that I continue to have, is making sure that we've got more, particularly our little ones and our most vulnerable. If you're talking about students with disabilities or English language learners, and our pre-K through grade 3-ish, I mean, those are the little ones that we really, I think, need immediately if we possibly can. And a lot of districts have done that, even in a hybrid model. They've brought the little ones in first, and then as time goes by to bring the older children back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nothing further then.
Okay.
Dr. Wright, we appreciate you coming before us this afternoon, doing a great job.
Thanks.
Keep up the good work, and thank you very much. You have a good year. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll entertain a motion from the committee. Rise and report. All right.